500 stranded passengers watched in stunned silence as Malcolm Washington, CEO of Skyline Global Holdings, stood in Terminal 4 and commanded ground every plane. His twin daughters' tear-streaked faces reflected on the massive departure screens turning red. "This ends today," he whispered, phone trembling in his hand. Before we dive into this incredible story of power, prejudice, and parental protection, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Now let's rewind to see how a simple family vacation turned into an industry-changing showdown. The Washington family home sat nestled in an exclusive Atlanta neighborhood where modern architecture blended seamlessly with lush southern landscaping. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement as 9-year-old twins Zara and Zoe Washington darted around their spacious bedroom, packing last-minute treasures for their spring break trip to Disney World. "Daddy, do you think I can meet Princess Tiana?" Zoe asked carefully, placing her autograph book in her backpack. Her voice held the pure wonder only a child could maintain. Malcolm Washington, 42, leaned against the doorframe of their room, his tall frame impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit despite the early hour. As CEO of Skyline Global Holdings, one of the nation's largest investment firms with interests spanning healthcare to aviation, Malcolm rarely appeared anything but polished. "Princess Tiana would be lucky to meet you two," he answered, with a warm smile that softened his otherwise serious demeanor. He checked his watch, a habit from years of precisely scheduled days. "I'm sorry I can't fly with you this morning. This board meeting came up suddenly, but I'll be on the afternoon flight and meet you at the hotel before dinner." Kendra Washington, 40, appeared behind her husband, her surgeon's hands gentle as she squeezed his shoulder. "The girls understand, don't you?" Her white lab coat was draped over her arm, ready for her final hospital rounds before her own vacation began. The twins nodded dutifully, though disappointment flickered across their identical faces. "Malcolm," Kendra said, quietly pulling him into the hallway while the girls finished packing, "Mrs. Peterson called from school yesterday. There was another incident." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "What happened?" "The science fair groups. Despite Zara having the highest grades, she was passed over for team captain. Third time this semester, they've been treated differently." Malcolm closed his eyes briefly. Success had insulated his family from many hardships, but never completely. "I'll call the principal when we're back." Again. His mind flashed to his own childhood, the gifted program he'd qualified for, but was mysteriously not admitted to the college counselor who suggested community college despite his 4 gigapascals, the first job interviews where he was told he wasn't the right fit despite his qualifications. "They'll be fine today," Kendra assured him, reading his thoughts. "First-class tickets, priority boarding, VIP treatment, no issues." An hour later, the family stood on the private airstrip where Malcolm kept the company helicopter. His pilot waited to transport him to Skyline headquarters, while a car service would take Kendra and the twins to Atlanta International Airport. Malcolm knelt to his daughter's level, straightening Zara's headband and adjusting Zoe's backpack strap. "Be good for Mom, listen to her instructions, and I'll see you tonight. We'll have the most magical week, I promise." The girls wrapped their arms around his neck, and for a moment Malcolm considered postponing the meeting. His family meant everything, but the pending acquisition of Pinnacle Airlines represented years of strategic planning. Today's negotiations were crucial. "Go change the world," Kendra said with a supportive smile, understanding the weight of responsibility her husband carried. Malcolm watched the car pull away, a vague uneasiness settling in his chest before he turned to board the helicopter, unaware of how dramatically his worlds were about to collide. Atlanta International Airport teemed with spring break travelers, a sea of movement and noise under the soaring terminal ceilings. Kendra Washington navigated through the crowd with practiced ease, one twin daughter holding each hand. They checked in online and proceeded directly to security, where Kendra's platinum status expedited their screening. The Washington trio made a striking picture, Kendra in a tailored beige pantsuit, the girls in matching blue dresses with white cardigans, their natural hair styled in neat braids adorned with blue ribbons. Their rolling carry-ons matched premium luggage, that spoke of frequent, comfortable travel. "Remember, girls, we're in boarding group 1, Kendra explained as they approached gate A22 where their flight to Orlando would depart. "When they call for first-class passengers, we'll go right up." The seating area was packed with families bound for Florida's theme parks. As the gate agent began preparations for boarding, Kendra positioned her family near the priority lane, digital boarding passes ready on her phone. "Good morning. We'll begin boarding our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance," announced a female gate agent over the intercom. Several passengers rose, forming a line in the priority boarding section. Kendra guided her daughters toward the line, standing behind an older white couple who were immediately greeted with smiles by Harrison Reed, the male gate agent checking boarding passes. "Good morning. Headed somewhere warm, I see," Reed remarked cheerfully to the couple, scanning their tickets with a flourish. "Enjoy your flight." When the Washingtons reached the podium, Reed's demeanor shifted. His smile tightened as his eyes flicked over Kendra and the twins. "Boarding passes?" he asked flatly, extending his hand without making eye contact. Kendra held up her phone. "Good morning. Washington party of 3, first class." Reed frowned at the screen, then at the family. "Are you sure you're in first class? This is priority boarding only." Heat rose to Kendra's cheeks, but her voice remained measured. "Yes, we're certain. We have first-class tickets and platinum status." She swiped to display their status on the Airline app. Reed squinted at the screen suspiciously. "These appear to be upgraded tickets. Did you recently change your seats?" "No," Kendra replied, maintaining her composure though her heart rate accelerated. "These tickets were purchased as first class directly through your airline 3 months ago." Behind them, more white passengers were being directed around them into the priority lane without similar scrutiny. "I'll need to see some ID." Reed insisted his tone, suggesting he'd caught someone in deception rather than simply verifying information. Kendra produced her driver's license while awareness dawned on her daughters' faces. Zoe glanced around, noticing they were the only passengers being questioned. Zara straightened her spine, a gesture reminiscent of her father when feeling challenged. After examining Kendra's ID for an unnecessarily long time, Reed called over his supervisor. "Pamela, can you verify these tickets? There seems to be some confusion." Pamela Brooks, a middle-aged woman with stiff blonde hair, approached with a clipboard. She took one look at the Washington family and assumed an authoritative stance. "Is there a problem?" "We're simply trying to board our flight," Kendra explained, frustration edging into her voice. "We have valid first-class tickets and platinum status, but your colleague seems confused about our eligibility for priority boarding." Brooks barely glanced at the boarding passes. "Ma'am, this line is for legitimate first-class passengers. Perhaps you misunderstood your ticket category." The deliberate emphasis on legitimate wasn't lost on Kendra, whose expertise as a neurosurgeon required her to remain calm under pressure. That skill was being tested now. "There's no misunderstanding," she stated firmly. "I've flown first class with your airline 73 times in the past 2 years. I am a platinum member, and these tickets were purchased as first class. Would you like me to log into my account to show you our travel history?" By now, several nearby passengers had begun watching the exchange. A white businessman who had walked up after them was waved through without question, his credentials unexamined. Brooks lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "Ma'am, if you continue to make a scene, I'll have to call security." A scene Kendra echoed in disbelief. "I'm simply trying to board the flight we paid for." Zoe's lower lip trembled as she clutched her mother's hand tighter. Zara, always the protector, put her arm around her sister's shoulder while staring defiantly at the gate agents. "Mommy, why can't we get on the plane?" Zoe whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Did we do something wrong?" The innocence of the question broke something in Kendra. The careful composure she'd maintained shattered. This wasn't about tickets anymore. It was about her daughters learning a lesson no parent wanted to teach. Sometimes, no matter your achievements or preparation, others will see only your skin color. "No, baby," Kendra answered loud enough for those nearby to hear. "We didn't do anything wrong. And I'm going to call Daddy right now." "We need to step aside for a moment," Kendra told her daughters, guiding them to a quieter area near a window overlooking the tarmac. She maintained physical contact with both girls, anchoring them amid the humiliation building around them. Kendra's hands trembled slightly as she dialed Malcolm's number. The phone rang twice before connecting. 40 miles away, Malcolm Washington sat at the head of Skyline Global Holdings' main conference table. Around him, board members and executives from Pinnacle Airlines reviewed acquisition projections displayed on a massive screen. The pending deal would give Skyline a 30% stake in the airline, a strategic expansion that would diversify their portfolio while giving them significant influence in the aviation sector. Richard Barnes, CEO of Pinnacle, was mid-sentence when Malcolm's phone vibrated. Glancing at the screen and seeing Kendra's name, Malcolm held up a hand. "Excuse me, Richard. I need to take this." Something in Malcolm's tone silenced any potential objections. "Kendra, everything all right?" he asked, stepping toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. The controlled fury in Kendra's voice immediately put him on alert. As she recounted what was happening, the questioning of their tickets, the dismissal of their status, the humiliation in front of other passengers, and most unforgivably the tears now streaming down Zoe's cheeks, Malcolm's expression darkened. "Put me on speaker," he instructed, his voice deceptively calm. The boardroom behind him had fallen silent, executives exchanging glances as Malcolm's posture transformed. "Zoe, Zara, it's Daddy," Malcolm said, modulating his tone for his daughters. "I'm so sorry this is happening. I promise you've done nothing wrong. I'm coming to the airport right now." "But your important meeting," Zara questioned, always mindful of her father's responsibilities. "There is nothing more important than you two," Malcolm replied without hesitation. "Stay with Mom. I'll be there soon." Ending the call, Malcolm turned to face the stunned executives. Richard Barnes stood with a concerned expression. "Is everything okay, Malcolm?" "No, Richard, it is not." Malcolm's voice carried the weight of generations of controlled anger. "My wife and daughters are currently being denied boarding on one of your aircraft despite having first-class tickets and platinum status. The gate agents have threatened to call security on them for simply attempting to board the flight they paid for." Barnes paled. "I'm sure there's some misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Malcolm cut in gathering his papers, "is that your employees believe they can discriminate against my family without consequences. Gentlemen, ladies, I apologize, but this meeting is adjourned until further notice." Malcolm protested senior board member William Peterson. "This acquisition has been in planning for 18 months. Surely your household staff could handle." Malcolm fixed Peterson with a stare that silenced him mid-sentence. "My children are not a household matter to be delegated, William. They are being traumatized while we discuss profit margins." He pressed the intercom. "Nancy, have my car brought around. And get Skyline's legal team on the line." As Malcolm strode from the room, he dialed his chief legal officer. "Thomas, I need you to pull every discrimination complaint filed against Pinnacle Airlines in the last 5 years. Send a team to meet me at Atlanta International Terminal A. And Thomas, we're going to need the force majeure clause for the acquisition." The sleek black Skyline corporate car sped toward the airport, Malcolm making rapid-fire calls. In the backseat, memories surfaced of his own father explaining why they couldn't sit in certain restaurants despite having the money to pay. Malcolm had promised himself his children would never face such indignities. Yet here they were. At the airport, the situation was escalating. After being forced to step aside, Kendra had begun recording the continued boarding process on her phone, documenting how white passengers in similar circumstances sailed through without scrutiny. "Ma'am, recording is not permitted in the secure area," a security officer warned, approaching Kendra. "Actually," Kendra replied calmly, "TSA regulations prohibit photography of screening areas and security checkpoints. There is no federal prohibition against recording at a boarding gate. I'm simply documenting a civil rights violation in progress." Several passengers had stopped to watch. Some recorded the incident themselves, while others pretended not to notice. A few approached Kendra, offering support. "This happened to my family last month," confided an older black woman. "Same airline, different airport." I'm a frequent flyer with them too, added a South Asian man in a business suit. They always randomly select me for additional screening. What had begun as an isolated incident was revealing itself as a pattern, and Kendra's medical training kicked in, diagnosed the true problem, not just the symptoms. Meanwhile, Malcolm's car pulled up to departures. As the CEO rushed through the terminal toward Gate A22, his phone buzzed with a text from Richard Barnes. "Malcolm, I've contacted our airport director. Whatever the misunderstanding, we'll resolve it immediately. Please don't let this affect our partnership." Malcolm didn't reply. The text only confirmed what he already knew: his family would suddenly receive VIP treatment now that their connection to him was known. But that wasn't justice, it was privilege. And it did nothing for the countless other passengers who didn't have a CEO on speed dial. As he approached the gate, Malcolm saw his daughters sitting close to Kendra, their excitement for Disney World replaced by confusion and hurt. In that moment, Malcolm Washington wasn't thinking as a CEO with a net worth of millions, but as a father seeing his children learn too early about the world's ugliness. He quickened his pace, determination hardening his resolve. This wouldn't just be made right for his family. This would change. Malcolm Washington moved through Atlanta International's Terminal A with purposeful strides, his tailored suit and commanding presence causing travelers to instinctively step aside. The security officers, who might typically question a man moving with such intensity, seemed to sense this wasn't someone to challenge. As he approached Gate A22, Malcolm spotted his family immediately. Kendra stood tall, phone still recording, while Zara and Zoe sat on nearby seats. Zoe's eyes were red-rimmed from crying, while Zara maintained a protective arm around her sister's shoulders. The gate agents Harrison Reed and Pamela Brooks were processing the final first-class passengers, seemingly having moved on from the disruption the Washington family had caused. They hadn't noticed the impeccably dressed man approaching their counter with controlled fury in his eyes. "Excuse me," Malcolm said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that commanded boardrooms across the country. Reed glanced up with the practiced customer service smile that had been notably absent when addressing Kendra. "Sir, we're currently boarding Group 1. If you'll check your boarding pass." "My boarding pass isn't the issue," Malcolm interrupted, placing his palms flat on the counter. "The issue is that you denied boarding to my wife and daughters despite their first-class tickets and platinum status." Reed's smile faltered as he processed Malcolm's words. Brooks stepped forward, adopting her supervisory tone. "Sir, there was some confusion about their ticket status, but if you'd like to speak to customer service..." "Miss Brooks," Malcolm said, reading her name tag, "I don't believe there was any confusion. My wife showed you valid tickets and identification. The only confusion seems to be your inability to believe a black family belongs in first class." The bluntness of Malcolm's statement caused nearby passengers to turn and stare. Some pulled out phones to record what was happening. "Sir, I assure you race had nothing to do with Reed," began. "Mr. Reed, please don't insult my intelligence," Malcolm cut in. "I'd like to speak with the highest authority present in this terminal, now." Something in Malcolm's demeanor must have signaled this wasn't a typical customer complaint. Brooks picked up a phone, murmuring urgently into the receiver. Malcolm turned away from the counter and walked to his family. Kneeling before his daughters, he pulled them into a gentle embrace. "I'm sorry, Daddy," Zoe whispered, her voice small. "Did we do something wrong with our tickets?" Malcolm pulled back to look into her eyes. "No, sweetheart. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Sometimes people make unfair judgments based on how we look, not who we are. Like when Mrs. Peterson didn't pick Zara for team captain even though she had the highest grades," Zoe asked, making connections no 9-year-old should have to make. Exactly like that, Malcolm confirmed, his heart breaking and hardening simultaneously. Kendra touched his shoulder. "The situation was escalating before you arrived. They threatened to call security when I began recording the discriminatory treatment." Malcolm nodded, standing to his full height as a harried-looking man in an airport director's blazer hurried toward them. "Mr. Washington," the man asked, extending his hand. "I'm Gregory Peterson, Terminal A Director. I understand there's been some unfortunate misunderstanding with your family's boarding. Malcolm didn't take the offered hand. There was no misunderstanding, Mr. Peterson. My family was profiled and discriminated against by your staff. Peterson's eyes darted nervously to the growing crowd of onlookers. Perhaps we could discuss this in my office. I'm sure we can resolve. No, Malcolm stated firmly. What happened to my family wasn't private. Neither will be the response. Peterson lowered his voice. Mr. Washington, we've just been informed of your connection to Skyline Holdings and the pending Pinnacle acquisition. I assure you this isn't how we treat our premium customers. That's precisely the problem, Malcolm replied, loud enough for others to hear. My family shouldn't need corporate connections to be treated with basic dignity. By now, a crowd had formed around the gate area. Malcolm noticed the security footage cameras positioned above the boarding area. Mr. Peterson, I want all security footage from this gate preserved immediately. My legal team is already en route. As if on cue, 3 professionally dressed individuals approached carrying Skyline Holdings identification. Thomas Chen, Malcolm's chief legal counsel, stepped forward. We've secured the cooperation of airport security for the footage, Thomas informed Malcolm quietly. And we've already had 3 other passengers approach us with similar experiences at Pinnacle gates today alone. Peterson's face paled. Mr. Washington, I can assure you that Pinnacle Airlines has strict non-discrimination policies. Policies without enforcement are just words, Mr. Peterson, Malcolm interrupted. What actions will you take right now to address what happened to my family and apparently many others? The gate area had grown silent as travelers watched the confrontation unfold. In that moment of tension, it wasn't just about the Washington family anymore. It had become something larger, a public reckoning with an experience many had endured silently. Do you believe Malcolm should pursue this as a personal matter or turn it into a larger systemic challenge? Comment 1 if you think he should focus on getting justice for his family only, or 2 if you believe he should push for company-wide changes. Like and subscribe to find out what Malcolm does next. With corporate power on one side and moral justice on the other, how far would you go to protect your children from discrimination? Let's continue this powerful story. Malcolm Washington stepped away from the growing crowd phone, pressed to his ear, as Skyline's legal team formed a protective circle around Kendra and the twins. The comforting hand Thomas Chen placed on Malcolm's shoulder spoke volumes about their relationship. This wasn't just his chief legal counsel, but a trusted friend who understood exactly what was at stake. Richard, Malcolm said into the phone, his voice carrying the forced calm of a man restraining a tempest. I'm standing in your terminal, watching my daughters process a lesson about their worth in this world that no child should learn. Richard Barnes, CEO of Pinnacle Airlines, had been desperately trying to reach Malcolm since receiving alarming messages about the situation unfolding. Malcolm, I cannot express how deeply disturbed I am by what you've described. This isn't who we are as a company. Isn't it, Malcolm cut in? Because from where I stand, this looks institutional. We've already identified multiple passengers with similar experiences just today. Barnes's voice took on the practiced crisis management tone of a CEO protecting his company. Isolated incidents don't represent our values. I've instructed our team to provide your family immediate boarding and a complete upgrade package. Richard, Malcolm interrupted again, each word precise. You misunderstand the situation. My family doesn't need special treatment. What we need is for no family to experience what mine just did. Malcolm paced toward the massive windows overlooking the tarmac where Pinnacle's fleet sat like gleaming promises of freedom and mobility, promises not equally extended to all. The acquisition agreement includes a force majeure clause that allows Skyline to withdraw if circumstances fundamentally change our assessment of Pinnacle's value, Malcolm continued. Systematic discrimination constitutes exactly such a circumstance. Silence hung on the line before Barnes responded, his voice markedly different. What are you saying, Malcolm? I'm saying you have 15 minutes to demonstrate that Pinnacle takes discrimination seriously or Skyline withdraws from acquisition talks. Permanently. 15 minutes. That's impossible. Corporate policy changes require board approval, stakeholder review. I'm not asking for policy papers, Richard. I'm asking for action. Show me you can respond to a crisis with more than damage control. Malcolm ended the call and turned to Thomas. How quickly can you draft an executive order grounding Pinnacle flights until anti-discrimination protocols are reviewed? Thomas blinked, momentarily stunned. You want to ground their fleet, Malcolm? That's unprecedented. The FAA would need… Not the FAA, Malcolm clarified. Skyline controls 17% of Pinnacle's operational funding through subsidiary investments. Our financing agreements include safety and regulatory compliance provisions. Discrimination violates federal transportation regulations. Understanding dawned on Thomas's face. I'll need 10 minutes. As Thomas worked feverishly on his tablet, Malcolm rejoined his family. Kendra's expression held a mixture of pride and concern. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. Using Skyline this way crosses the line between personal and professional. Malcolm took her hands in his. That line was crossed the moment they made our daughters cry for existing in first-class seats. He looked at Zoe and Zara, who watched him with wide eyes. Sometimes standing up for what's right requires using every tool available. Across the terminal, Peterson was engaged in an increasingly frantic phone conversation, occasionally glancing toward the Washington family with growing alarm. Malcolm's phone chimed with a document notification from Thomas. The executive order was ready. Just as Malcolm opened it, Richard Barnes's name flashed on his screen again. Your 15 minutes aren't up, Malcolm answered coolly. Malcolm, be reasonable, Barnes pleaded. I've dispatched our diversity officer to the terminal. Reed and Brooks have been placed on administrative leave. What more can I do in 15 minutes? Malcolm's gaze drifted to the departure screens, where dozens of Pinnacle flights blinked with on-time status. You can demonstrate that this matters more than convenience. Ground your flights, Richard. Every single one until your staff receives emergency anti-discrimination briefing. That would strand thousands of passengers. The financial implications would be nothing compared to losing our acquisition. Malcolm finished for him. This is my final offer. The line went silent again, before Barnes responded, resignation in his voice. How long? 2 hours. Enough time for every crew to receive direct communication from leadership that discrimination won't be tolerated with immediate consequences for violations. After another long pause, Barnes conceded, I'll make it happen. Malcolm didn't wait for further discussion. He ended the call and pressed his electronic signature to the document Thomas had prepared, a backup plan if Barnes failed to follow through. Minutes later, Malcolm stood with his family and watched as the impossible happened. Throughout terminal, departure screens blinked from green to red as flight after flight switched to delayed. Announcements began echoing through the terminal. Attention Pinnacle passengers. Due to an important all-staff safety and service briefing, all Pinnacle flights are experiencing a ground stop. We apologize for the inconvenience and expect to resume normal operations within 2 hours. The terminal erupted in groans and complaints. Passengers rushed to customer service counters demanding explanations. Social media exploded with speculation about mechanical issues or security threats. Zara tugged on Malcolm's sleeve, her young face serious. Daddy, all these people are upset because of us. Malcolm knelt to her level. Not because of us, sweetheart. Because sometimes fixing something broken causes temporary inconvenience. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't fix it. As chaos swirled around them, Malcolm's phone began lighting up with notifications. Board members demanding explanations. Business reporters seeking comments. Competing airlines sensing opportunity in Pinnacle's crisis. Kendra established a makeshift command center in a premium lounge that had been quickly cleared for the Washington family's use. Malcolm's team expanded as more Skyline executives arrived, transforming a corner of Atlanta International into an impromptu war room. Malcolm Thomas approached with a tablet displaying rapidly updating news headlines. This has gone viral. Number grounded for equality is trending nationwide. The hashtag accompanied videos from the confrontation at Gate A22 already viewed hundreds of thousands of times. Public sentiment seemed divided between outrage at the discrimination and frustration over the resulting travel disruption. "Sir," a young associate interrupted, "we've compiled initial documentation of previous discrimination complaints against Pinnacle. The pattern is significant." Malcolm reviewed the preliminary findings, dozens of formal complaints, hundreds more on social media, all describing similar treatment. Black passengers questioned about ticket validity. South Asian travelers subjected to random additional screenings. Latino families asked if they understood English boarding instructions. Individual incidents that, when viewed collectively, revealed an unmistakable pattern. The twins had settled on a sofa in the lounge, their Disney excitement momentarily forgotten as they watched their father transform from the dad who made them Mickey-shaped pancakes into someone who could stop airplanes with a signature. Malcolm caught Zoe's wide-eyed gaze and felt a sudden uncertainty. Was he showing his daughters the right lesson about power and its application? Or was he demonstrating exactly the kind of privilege he claimed to be fighting? Before he could contemplate further, Richard Barnes himself strode into the lounge, having flown in by helicopter from Pinnacle headquarters. Malcolm Barnes acknowledged, with a tense nod. "You've made your point. Our entire fleet is grounded, costing us approximately $2 million per hour. Are you satisfied?" Malcolm gestured to his daughters. "Do they look satisfied, Richard? Do they look like they've received justice by watching planes get delayed?" Barnes followed Malcolm's gaze to the twins, and something in the CEO's expression shifted. Perhaps it was seeing the actual children affected rather than abstract concepts of corporate liability. Or perhaps it was recognition that this wasn't a negotiation tactic, but a father's genuine pain. "What do you want, Malcolm, really want?" Malcolm looked from his daughters to his wife, then back to Barnes. "I want systematic change, Richard. Not diversity seminars and sensitivity training, but real accountability with real consequences. I want transformation, not damage control." Barnes nodded slowly, the calculation in his eyes giving way to something resembling understanding. "Then let's build that together. But first, let's get those planes back in the air, including the one taking your family to Disney World." As Barnes extended his hand, Malcolm recognized the offer wasn't capitulation, but partnership. This wasn't the end of a confrontation, but the beginning of something more substantial. The real work was just starting. By late afternoon, Atlanta International Airport had transformed into ground zero for a national conversation on race and privilege. News vans lined the drop-off area, reporters stationed themselves throughout the terminals, and social media feeds overflowed with opinions, hashtags, and first-hand accounts from passengers. Inside the executive lounge, Malcolm Washington stood before a hastily assembled backdrop bearing Skyline's logo cameras, capturing his measured statement. What began as a family trip revealed a troubling pattern of discriminatory practices that affect countless travelers daily. "Today's actions weren't about special treatment for my family, but equal treatment for all families. Skyline Global Holdings believes businesses must be held accountable not just for profitability, but for the dignity with which they treat every customer, regardless of appearance or background." The statement was being broadcast live across multiple networks, Pinnacle's stock price dropping with each carefully chosen word. Malcolm had insisted on addressing the situation directly rather than through corporate communications. This wasn't a moment for polished PR, but for authentic leadership. In an adjacent room, Kendra supervised as Zara and Zoe colored in Disney princess books provided by airport staff now bending over backward to accommodate the Washington family. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. "Your husband certainly knows how to make an impact," remarked Jasmine Powell, a flight attendant who had been reassigned to assist the family. Her tone carried a note of admiration tinged with caution. "Malcolm doesn't start fights," Kendra replied, watching her daughters. "But he believes in finishing them definitively." Outside the private rooms, the terminal buzzed with activity as Pinnacle's emergency protocols took effect. Supervisors conducted impromptu training sessions with gate agents. Flight crews received briefings before being cleared for departure. Customer service representatives fielded calls from concerned shareholders and stranded passengers. Malcolm's phone hadn't stopped vibrating since his statement concluded. His board members were divided, some applauding the principled stand, others concerned about potential blowback on Skyline's other business interests. The acquisition is still viable, Malcolm reassured William Peterson, his most vocal critic on the board, but only with meaningful accountability mechanisms built into the agreement. You've overstepped, Peterson argued, using corporate power to address a personal grievance. Discrimination isn't personal, William, it's systemic, Malcolm countered, and sometimes systems only change when those with power demand it. After ending the call, Malcolm joined Thomas at a makeshift monitoring station where social media reactions were being analyzed in real time. It's polarized, as expected, Thomas reported, gesturing to the screens. Support is running about 60-40 in our favor, with stronger approval among younger demographics. The opposing viewpoints generally fall into three categories: those questioning your methods rather than your message, those denying discrimination exists at all, and those concerned about the precedent of a CEO leveraging corporate influence. For social justice issues, and Pinnacle's internal response, Malcolm asked, mixed. Some executives see this as an opportunity for genuine reform. Others view it as extortion. Thomas paused. There's something else. We've been contacted by a Pinnacle employee who claims to have documentation of systematic discriminatory practices. She wants to meet. Malcolm's eyebrows rose. Here. Now. She's a flight attendant named Jasmine Powell, 15 years with the company. She says she's been collecting evidence for 3 years, but feared retaliation without powerful allies. Malcolm considered the implications. Set it up, but verify her credentials first. Meanwhile, the crisis had escalated beyond the airport. Television pundits debated the ethics of Malcolm's actions. Business analysts speculated on the acquisition's future. Civil rights leaders called for broader investigations into discrimination across the airline industry. Richard Barnes appeared on financial news networks attempting damage control while promising a comprehensive review of customer service protocols. The carefully crafted statement satisfied neither critics nor supporters, too defensive for the former, too conciliatory for the latter. Back in the lounge, Kendra watched her daughter's reactions to seeing their father on television. Is Daddy in trouble? Zoe asked, concern shadowing her young face. No, sweetheart, Kendra assured her. Daddy is standing up for what's right, even though it's difficult. Zara, always more analytical, had a different question. Will people be mad at us now? The innocence of the question struck Kendra, her 9-year-old, already understanding the potential consequences of challenging systemic problems. Some might be, Kendra answered honestly. But that doesn't mean we stop speaking truth. As Pinnacle flights gradually resumed operations, Thomas ushered Jasmine Powell into a private meeting room where Malcolm waited. The flight attendant carried herself with the confident poise her profession required, though tension lined her face. Mr. Washington, she began, what you did today is what many of us have wished for years someone would do. I appreciate that, Miss Powell, but I understand you have more than moral support to offer. Jasmine placed a flash drive on the table. 3 years of documented incidents. Emails from supervisors instructing us to provide additional verification for passengers who don't match the premium passenger profile. Training materials with coded language about maintaining cabin, culture, performance reviews where I was penalized for over-accommodating certain passengers. Malcolm examined the drive. You realize sharing internal documents could violate your employment contract. Some things matter more than a job, Mr. Washington. Jasmine straightened her shoulders. My grandfather was forced to use separate water fountains. My father couldn't get a loan to start his business despite perfect credit. I thought my generation would be different, but instead I've been serving drinks to passengers while watching the same discrimination dressed in corporate policy. Malcolm nodded slowly, a new ally recognized. My legal team will review this immediately. In the meantime, In the meantime, Jasmine interrupted with unexpected boldness. There are 23 other Pinnacle employees throughout this airport ready to come forward with similar documentation. We've been waiting for this moment, building our case in silence. You just gave us the platform we needed. The revelation stunned Malcolm. What had begun as a family incident had uncovered an organized resistance within Pinnacle itself. Employees who had been fighting the same battle from the inside. As this information processed, Malcolm's phone lit up with Richard Barnes's name again. The Pinnacle CEO had arrived at the terminal in person, requesting an immediate meeting. "Send him in," Malcolm instructed Thomas before turning back to Jasmine. "Would you be willing to stay? I believe Mr. Barnes should hear directly from his employees." Jasmine hesitated only briefly before nodding. "That's why I'm here." When Barnes entered, his confident CEO demeanor faltered at the sight of Jasmine in what he'd expected to be a private negotiation. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed quickly by understanding of what her presence signified. Richard Malcolm said simply, "I believe you know Miss Powell." The atmosphere crackled with tension as Barnes slowly took a seat across from them, the power dynamic shifting visibly. This was no longer just about the Washington family or even an acquisition. It had become something much larger, a moment of reckoning that would reshape not just one airline but perhaps an entire industry's approach to equality. Outside, as sunset painted the airport in golden hues, Pinnacle flights resumed their journeys across the sky. But something fundamental had changed on the ground below. Jasmine Powell had not planned to become a whistleblower that day. She had reported for her regular flight schedule uniform, perfectly pressed, her natural hair neatly styled, according to Pinnacle's restrictive professional appearance guidelines. After 15 years of navigating the company's subtle biases, she had learned to work within the system while documenting its flaws. But watching the Washington family's humiliation from across the terminal had catalyzed something in her. When she witnessed Malcolm Washington's unprecedented response, Jasmine recognized the rare alignment of courage and capability, someone with both the will and the power to effect change. Now she sat across from Richard Barnes, the CEO whose signature appeared on countless memos she had secretly archived, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Miss Powell has been with Pinnacle for 15 years, Malcolm explained, and has meticulously documented what appears to be systematic discrimination within your operations." Barnes adjusted his tie, corporate instincts kicking in. Any employee concerns should be addressed through proper HR channels. "I've filed 27 reports through proper channels in the last 3 years. Jasmine interrupted, her voice steady. Each one was dismissed, minimized, or buried. Meanwhile, I watched passengers who look like me repeatedly subjected to random checks and verification that white passengers never experienced. Jasmine opened a folder containing printed emails. This directive from Regional Director Clayton instructed gate agents to exercise additional vigilance with non-typical premium cabin passengers. When I asked for clarification, I was told it meant passengers who might not be familiar with first-class protocols code for profiling based on appearance. Barnes reached for the documents, scanning them with growing discomfort. These communications are concerning, but they don't necessarily reflect company policy. Perhaps this will clarify things, Malcolm interrupted, nodding to Thomas, who projected an internal Pinnacle training video onto the wall. The video part of Jasmine's evidence showed customer service scenarios with subtle but unmistakable biases in how different passengers were portrayed. As the video played, Barnes's expression shifted from defensive to genuinely disturbed. "When was this produced?" "Last year," Jasmine answered. "Required viewing for all customer-facing staff." Malcolm leaned forward. "Richard, this isn't about a single incident with my family. This is cultural and institutional." The confrontation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Thomas opened it to reveal a diverse group of Pinnacle employees, flight attendants, gate agents, baggage handlers, and maintenance workers. At their center stood a tall black man in a pilot's uniform, his captain's stripes gleaming under the lounge lights. "Mr. Washington," the captain said, "I'm Marcus Reynolds, senior pilot with Pinnacle. We understand Miss Powell is speaking with you and Mr. Barnes. We're here to add our voices to hers. Barnes stood clearly shocked by the impromptu delegation. Captain Reynolds, this isn't the appropriate forum. With respect, sir, Reynolds replied, we've attempted appropriate forums for years. Today represents our first real opportunity to be heard. Malcolm watched the dynamics unfold with strategic interest. What had begun as an individual stand against discrimination was transforming into something more powerful, a coalition of voices from within the very system they sought to change. Please come in, Malcolm invited, ignoring Barnes's obvious discomfort. Over the next hour, employee after employee shared experiences that painted a disturbing picture black pilots consistently assigned to less desirable routes. Latino crew members passed over for promotion despite superior performance reviews. Asian customer service representatives assigned to international terminals regardless of language skills or preferences. Individually, each story might be dismissed as coincidence. Collectively, they formed an irrefutable pattern. Barnes sat in stunned silence, occasionally attempting defenses that withered under the weight of first-hand accounts. His corporate training hadn't prepared him for this unscripted confrontation with the human costs of his company's culture. Why haven't I heard these concerns before? Barnes finally asked. A flight attendant named Teresa Rodriguez answered, because people who spoke up found themselves with reduced hours, problematic schedules, or performance reviews that suddenly discovered deficiencies. The confrontation had evolved beyond Malcolm's initial expectations. These weren't disgruntled employees seeking compensation, but dedicated professionals risking their livelihoods to improve the company they'd committed their careers to. As the testimonies continued, Malcolm received a text from Kendra. The twins are asking when we'll get to Disney. They're tired, but holding up okay. The message grounded Malcolm. While addressing systemic issues was crucial, his daughters needed resolution too. This day had already demanded too much from them. Malcolm stood commanding attention without raising his voice, a skill honed in countless boardrooms. Richard, these brave employees have given you a gift today. They've shown you a reality within your company that you claim to be unaware of. Now you have a choice. You can treat this as a PR problem to manage, or you can recognize it as a fundamental failure requiring transformation. Barnes looked around the room at the employees, whose experiences he could no longer deny. Something in the CEO's demeanor shifted perhaps the first genuine reaction since the crisis began. What are you proposing, Malcolm? A new kind of partnership. The acquisition proceeds, but with conditions. Skyline stake comes with oversight of a newly formed Inclusion and Passenger Rights Division with real power, hiring authority, budget control, and direct reporting to the board. Malcolm gestured to the assembled employees. Staffed by people who understand the problems firsthand and have demonstrated commitment to Pinnacle despite everything they've experienced. Barnes frowned. You want me to hand control of a major division to employees who just ambushed me with grievances. I want you to recognize expertise when you see it, Malcolm countered. These aren't just complainers, Richard. These are loyal employees who care enough to risk their jobs to make Pinnacle better. That's the kind of dedication most CEOs dream of fostering. The room fell silent as Barnes considered the proposal. The business calculation was visible on his face, weighing the costs of resistance against the benefits of cooperation. Captain Reynolds broke the silence. Mr. Barnes, we're not asking to tear Pinnacle apart. We're asking for the tools to help it live up to its own stated values. Something in the pilot's words seemed to reach Barnes. He turned to Malcolm with newfound resolution. I'll need board approval for structural changes of this magnitude. Malcolm smiled for the first time that day. As it happens, I'll soon control 30% of your board votes. Laughter rippled through the room, breaking the tension. Even Barnes managed a rueful smile at the leveraged position he found himself in. One more thing, Malcolm added. My family has a vacation to start. I want your personal guarantee that they'll reach Orlando tonight without further incident. Barnes nodded, extending his hand. You have my word. And Malcolm, thank you for forcing me to see what I should have been looking for all along. As the impromptu alliance began discussing implementation details, Malcolm stepped away to call Kendra. We're going to Disney tonight, he told her. but we're bringing back something more valuable than souvenirs. Just as Kendra guessed. Better, Malcolm replied, watching Jasmine and her colleagues outline their vision for a transformed pinnacle, change. The following morning, while most families at Disney World were rushing to beat lines at popular attractions, the Washington family gathered in a hotel conference room that had been hastily converted into a remote workspace. Malcolm had insisted their vacation proceed, but with modifications, mornings would be dedicated to finalizing the Pinnacle Resolution afternoons to making memories with the twins. Zara and Zoe sat at a small table in the corner, coloring Disney character sheets, while occasionally glancing at the adults with curious eyes. Though Malcolm had offered to arrange childcare so Kendra could enjoy the parks with the girls while he handled business, Kendra had declined. They should see this part too, she'd said. Not just the confrontation, but the construction that follows. Now Kendra sat beside Malcolm at the main table, her medical training bringing valuable perspective to the discussion. Across from them, Richard Barnes joined virtually from Pinnacle headquarters, flanked by his executive team. Jasmine Powell and Captain Reynolds represented the employee coalition, while Thomas directed Skyline's legal team through the intricate work of transforming moral imperatives into contractual obligations. The framework must balance accountability with achievability, Malcolm stated, setting the tone for the meeting. We're not interested in creating requirements so burdensome they're destined to fail. We want transformation that takes root. Over the next 3 hours, a comprehensive anti-discrimination framework took shape, addressing both immediate concerns and long-term cultural change. First, Jasmine proposed transparent hiring and promotion metrics, all advancement decisions tracked by demographics and reviewed quarterly for patterns. Barnes nodded, though his CFO looked pained at the implementation costs. Second, Captain Reynolds added route and schedule assignments through a blind algorithm that removes potential bias in distribution of desirable placements. Kendra, who had been mostly observing, spoke up. As a medical professional, I'd suggest including psychological safety training. Discrimination doesn't just inconvenience people, it creates lasting trauma, particularly for children. She glanced meaningfully at her daughters, and the room followed her gaze. The human stakes of their discussion couldn't be more visibly represented than by 2 9-year-old girls whose Disney vacation had been preceded by public humiliation. The framework must include consequences, Malcolm insisted. Not just training that people endure then ignore, but real accountability for violations. Thomas presented the legal architecture, an independent review board with representatives from Skyline Pinnacle, leadership employee advocates, and civil rights experts. Authority to review complaints, recommend policy changes, and determine appropriate responses to verified incidents. Barnes frowned. That's unprecedented oversight for an independent company. So was grounding your entire fleet, Malcolm countered. Consider this the alternative to having similar interventions in the future. The negotiation continued, each point thoroughly debated. When discussions became tense, Malcolm would glance at his daughters, reminding everyone in the room of the human impact behind the corporate language. By midday, they had outlined a resolution framework that satisfied all parties. 1. Immediate disciplinary review for the gate agents involved in the Washington incident with appropriate consequences based on findings. 2. Comprehensive audit of all customer service protocols to identify and eliminate biased language or procedures. 3. Establishment of the Office of Inclusion and Passenger Rights with Jasmine Powell as inaugural director reporting directly to the board. 4. Mandatory company-wide training with effectiveness measured through practical testing, not just completion. 5. Transparent tracking and publishing of discrimination complaints and resolutions. 6. Financial investment in recruitment and advancement programs for underrepresented groups. 7. Regular culture surveys with results tied to executive compensation. 8. Implementation timeline with specific benchmarks and third-party verification. The twins had grown restless during the lengthy discussions. Zoe approached the table, tugging gently on Malcolm's sleeve. "Daddy, is it fixed now?" she asked her innocent question, cutting through corporate complexity to the essential purpose. Malcolm lifted her onto his lap. Not yet, sweetheart. Fixing big problems takes time, but we've made a good start. Barnes, watching the interaction, seemed to absorb its significance. Miss Washington, he addressed Zoe directly, I want to personally apologize for how you and your sister were treated yesterday. It was wrong, and we're going to work very hard to make sure it doesn't happen to any other children. Zoe studied him with the unfiltered assessment only children can provide. Promise. I promise, Barnes replied, the simple exchange somehow carrying more weight than the pages of legal framework they'd just developed. Malcolm checked his watch. I believe we've accomplished what we needed to this morning. The legal teams can finalize language, while my family enjoys some overdue vacation time. As the meeting concluded, Jasmine approached Kendra, while Malcolm wrapped up with Thomas. Your husband changed everything with one phone call, Jasmine remarked. But you were the one who stood your ground first, who taught your daughters to recognize injustice. That deserves acknowledgement too, Kendra smiled. Sometimes the most important advocacy happens without power or position, just persistence. Before the Washingtons departed for the park, Barnes requested a final private word with Malcolm. The acquisition will proceed, the Pinnacle CEO confirmed. With the framework in place, yes, Malcolm assured him. But with ongoing verification of compliance. One stroke of a pen doesn't change culture. Actions over time do. Barnes nodded thoughtfully. I've been running this airline for 12 years, Malcolm. I considered myself a good leader. How did I miss something so fundamental? The most insidious problems are the ones we're trained not to see, Malcolm replied. The question isn't why you missed it yesterday. It's what you'll do with awareness today. As the Washington family finally headed toward Magic Kingdom, Malcolm's phone buzzed with notifications of Pinnacle's stock recovering as news of the resolution framework reached investors. The business world was already analyzing the precedent, being set a corporate acquisition tied not just to financial metrics, but to social responsibility requirements. Malcolm silenced his phone as they approached the park entrance. For the rest of the day, he would be just a father watching his daughters experience Disney magic, their resilience already reasserting itself after yesterday's trauma. Yet as Zara and Zoe ran ahead toward the castle, Malcolm knew that the true resolution wasn't the document they'd crafted in that conference room. It was the world these actions would help shape for his children, a world where they might someday board any flight without question, lead any company without exceptional effort, and navigate public spaces without the constant calculation of how their presence might be perceived. That transformation wouldn't be completed today or tomorrow. But it had begun, and for now, that was enough. 6 months later, the Washington family once again moved through Atlanta International Airport, though under dramatically different circumstances. The twins skipped ahead, pulling their matching roller bags, their confidence restored after months of processing and healing from the incident that had momentarily dimmed their spirits. Malcolm and Kendra followed at a more measured pace, observing the subtle but significant changes throughout the terminal. New signage prominently displayed passenger rights information in multiple languages. The staff at security checkpoints and gates reflected noticeably more diversity. Most telling was the behavior of gate agents' consistent verification procedures applied to all passengers regardless of appearance. "Daddy, look!" Zoe pointed excitedly toward their gate. "It's Miss Jasmine." Jasmine Powell stood at the boarding area, no longer in a flight attendant's uniform, but in a tailored business suit, the newly created Office of Inclusion and Passenger Rights badge prominently displayed. She smiled warmly as she spotted the Washington family approaching. The Washingtons. What perfect timing, Jasmine greeted them. "I'm conducting our monthly field audit today. How has your experience been so far?" "Noticeably different," Kendra replied. "The security officer actually explained the random selection process when my bag was chosen for additional screening." Malcolm nodded in agreement. Transparency makes all the difference. When people understand the why behind procedures, it removes the assumption of bias. Jasmine beamed with pride. "That's from our new communication protocols. Every selection for additional verification requires a clear explanation of the selection methodology." She knelt to the twins' level. Are you girls excited about your trip? We're going to Grandma's birthday in Chicago, Zara explained importantly. She's turning 65. Wonderful. Would you mind if I walk with you to your gate? I'd love to hear how school's going. As they proceeded through the terminal, Malcolm fell into conversation with Jasmine about the implementation progress of their framework. The initial 3 months had been challenging resistance from middle management budget battles and the inertia of established practices. But measurable improvements were now emerging across every metric they'd established. The quarterly report shows customer satisfaction up 12% among minority passengers, Jasmine informed him. Complaint rates down 23% overall. And employee retention has improved significantly in demographics that previously showed high turnover. And Harrison Reed and Pamela Brooks, Malcolm asked, referring to the gate agents from the original incident. That's actually quite remarkable, Jasmine replied. After their disciplinary period and completion of our intensive training program, Reed requested to join the Inclusion Initiative as a peer educator. He's been surprisingly effective at helping other agents recognize their unconscious biases. Brooks chose early retirement. They arrived at the Washington's departure gate, where a familiar face was checking boarding passes. Harrison Reed himself now sporting a second badge, identifying him as an inclusion ambassador. Malcolm felt Kendra tense slightly beside him. The encounter they'd both wondered about was now unavoidable. Reed looked up and recognized the family immediately. To his credit, he didn't flinch or look away, instead greeting them with professional courtesy while completing the current passenger's verification. When the Washingtons reached the podium, Reed addressed them directly. "Good afternoon, Dr. Washington, Mr. Washington." He turned his attention to the twins. "And hello to you too, Zara and Zoe." The use of the girls' names, a simple recognition of their individuality, was not lost on Malcolm. "Your boarding passes, please." Reed continued maintaining the same verification protocol he'd used with previous passengers. As he processed their information, Reed spoke quietly. "Mr. Washington, I owe you and your family an apology. Not a corporate one, but a personal one. My actions that day were inexcusable, and the consequence has been a complete reevaluation of beliefs I didn't even realize I held. I'm deeply sorry for the hurt I caused your daughters." The apology was straightforward and without qualification, no excuses about company policy or training deficiencies. Malcolm hadn't expected this level of personal accountability. "Thank you, Mr. Reed," he responded simply. "Acknowledgement is the first step toward change." Reed handed back their boarding passes with a nod. "You're all set for priority boarding, which will begin in approximately 10 minutes. As the family moved to the waiting area, Zara looked back at Reed thoughtfully. "He seems different, Daddy." "People can change, sweetheart," Malcolm replied. "Sometimes they just need the right motivation and opportunity." Kendra checked her watch. "I should call the conference organizers before we board. My presentation on childhood resilience in the face of discrimination has been moved to the opening session." Following the incident, Kendra had channeled her experience into her research, developing new protocols for helping children process discriminatory encounters. Her work had gained national attention, particularly her emphasis on empowering children rather than just protecting them. "Dr. Powell will be joining us in Chicago next month," Kendra told Malcolm, referring to Jasmine by her new title since completing her PhD in organizational psychology. "The hospital wants her input on our patient experience protocols." The unexpected friendship that had developed between the Washington family and Jasmine Powell represented one of the most personal outcomes of the confrontation. What began as an alliance of necessity had evolved into genuine connection based on shared values and complementary expertise. As their flight was called for boarding, Malcolm received a text message from Richard Barnes' quarterly review board meeting next week. "Acquisition transition complete. Metrics all green. Thank you again." The Skyline acquisition of Pinnacle had concluded successfully 3 months ago, with the anti-discrimination framework fully embedded in the transition agreement. Other airlines had taken notice, some proactively implementing similar measures to avoid comparable incidents. Industry publications had begun, including equity metrics in their airline rankings, creating market incentives for inclusive practices. The Washington family boarded their flight without incident, the process so smooth and unremarkable that the twins quickly turned their attention to the tablets containing their favorite games. As they settled into their seats, Malcolm found himself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The incident had cost him personally sleepless nights, board conflicts, and the weight of scrutiny that came with taking such a public stand. Yet watching his daughters, now their dignity intact and their confidence restored, reaffirmed the necessity of that difficult day. "You're quiet," Kendra observed as the plane prepared for takeoff. "Just thinking about consequences," Malcolm replied. "Not just from that day, but from the choices we make when facing injustice." The twins are watching, learning how to navigate a world that won't always welcome them. "And what lesson do you hope they've learned?" Kendra asked. Malcolm watched as Zara helped Zoe adjust her headphones, the sisterly bond that had strengthened through adversity. "That they're never powerless," he said finally. "That they have both the right and the responsibility to speak truth, whether they have my position and resources or not. That the world changes when enough people refuse to accept what is unacceptable." Kendra squeezed his hand as the plane accelerated down the runway. "I think they're learning that lesson quite well." As the aircraft lifted into the clouds, Malcolm Washington, CEO, husband, and most importantly, father, felt a profound gratitude. Not just for the privilege and position that had allowed him to force change when others couldn't, but for the opportunity to show his daughters that systems, no matter how entrenched, could be transformed when courage met capability, principle partnered with power. The true measure of their success wouldn't be found in quarterly reports or policy documents, but in the countless families who would never know what they had been spared. The humiliations prevented the dignity, preserved the equality. Assumed rather than fought for. And perhaps someday, when Zara and Zoe Washington were grown, they would look back on that difficult day not as a trauma, but as a turning point, the moment they learned that justice, while never easy, was always worth the effort. This story reminds us that true change requires both courage and capability working together. Malcolm's position as CEO gave him leverage, but it was his moral clarity and willingness to act that created transformation. The Washington family's experience highlights several powerful truths. First, discrimination persists, even in post-racial America, affecting children in particularly damaging ways. Second, systems rarely change voluntarily. They require pressure applied strategically and consistently. Third, allies exist within problematic organizations, often waiting for the right moment to speak truth. Most importantly, this narrative teaches us that advocacy isn't just about winning individual battles, but transforming entire systems. By refusing special treatment and instead demanding structural change, Malcolm ensured that countless families would benefit from his stand. The story demonstrates that parents must sometimes make difficult choices, using whatever tools they possess to create a more just world for their children, not through privilege, but through accountability. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you could intervene? What would you have done in Malcolm's position with his resources? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to amplify these important conversations about racial justice. Your engagement helps ensure more stories like this reach those who need to hear them. Thank you for joining our community, dedicated to recognizing and confronting discrimination in all its forms. Remember, every voice matters in the ongoing work of building a more equitable world.